Before I begin, I have two questions I'd like everyone to think about carefully. First question, do you think your life is precious or worthless? Second question, do you feel like the road ahead is long and endless? All right, what do you all think? Please type your thoughts on the chat screen. If you think life is long, try breaking it down into months, weeks, and days. You'll suddenly realize that the time you have left is actually very limited. To some extent, you have to admit that your life is rare, and as the saying goes, rarity makes something valuable. Your life is precious. Today's content is based on an article titled The Tail End, which translates to Your Life in Chinese. Using this article as a starting point, I'll discuss how to achieve happiness in life. Our content will be divided into three main sections. Part 1, Visualizing Your Life. Part 2, Estimating Events. Part 3, Optimizing Your Life. Here's a table that shows just how long your life actually is. Let's assume that everyone lives to be 90 years old. In that case, you'll spend 32,872 days in this world. That works out to 4,696 weeks. When you just hear me mention these numbers, it doesn't really strike you as short. But take a look at this chart. This is all the time you have in your lifetime. Once we can visualize our limited time and our finite lives, we start to realize that life is fleeting and precious, don't we? At this point, we can use a simple method to determine whether we've lived a life worth living. Whether we measure life in weeks, months, or days, here's how it works. For example, if you had a happy week, color in this hollow circle red. If you didn't, color it blue. Just talking about this process makes me want to cough. What kind of life is a happy one? Let me ask you, does having money mean you're happy? Actually, no. Many wealthy people commit suicide, don't they? That shows they really were struggling. They had their own troubles. You just didn't know about them. The same goes for poor people. For the human species, whether one is happy is related to money, but not to that extent. From a Buddhist perspective, everyone has their own troubles, and no one can escape the sea of suffering. So what kind of life is worth living? It's one where there are far more red dots than blue ones. A life like that is worth living. It proves that the time you spent happy, the time that was worthwhile, and the time you felt content far outweighs the time you spent in pain. Only a life like that is worth living. If there were just as many red dots as blue ones, I'd feel like I'd lived my life in vain. I really do feel that way. Yes, I'd feel like I've failed. But what if there are more blue dots? What then? I'll make sure the rest of my life has far more red dots. This raises another question. Who decides whether this color is red or blue? It's me, that's right. It's you, isn't it? So how can you make sure you fill in more of that red? I think there are 4 key areas. First, try to do things that make you happy. Here's a simple example. When it comes to work, try to spend your time on tasks that bring you a little more joy. When you go out on the weekend, try to do things that are guaranteed to make you happy. And when you go shopping or traveling with others, try to choose people who are sure to make you happy. That's the first point. What's the second point? I think foreigners have a great attitude. When I was studying abroad, I'd sometimes tell a joke, and my classmates would get really excited. After they laughed, they'd say, "Tony, you made my day." What does made my day mean? It means you made my day worthwhile. You made sure today wasn't a waste, right? All because of that one joke, right? So we need to adopt this make my day mindset. What does that mean? It means that even if today has been terrible, you absolutely have to find one thing. What exactly? That makes you feel like, even if everything else was awful, today wasn't a total waste. That way, you'll mark today as a success. You'll think, screw it, today's been a total nightmare. But when I got home tonight, I listened to a comedy sketch and watched a stand-up show. I'm so happy. Today wasn't a waste. Or maybe I read an article, right? Or I watched an episode of Thinking Wolf. It wasn't a waste. I learned something. It wasn't a waste. Okay, that day is now marked in red. What's the third point called? Changing your perspective. It's a concept from Buddhism. Actually, sometimes it's the same situation. You just shift your perspective a little, and what was a bad thing turns into a good thing. You all know I have a good friend from Korea. He told me that for a while, he and his girlfriend were in a long-distance relationship. I asked, "What if he cheats on you?" He said, "That'd be great." He suddenly started clapping. I said, "What are you clapping for? Are you out of your mind, man?" He replied, "If she cheats on me, it means God has taken the wrong person away from me. Isn't that a good thing? It shows that heaven loves me." See, just by shifting your perspective, a bad thing turns into a good one. It's better than getting married to him only to discover later that he's unfaithful to you. So sometimes this kind of foresight is very important, but it requires wisdom. The fourth point is very important. It's called cutting your losses in time. Let me ask you this. If you failed the college entrance exam, could you get over it right away? Even if you'd been doing exceptionally well in your studies, but just had a bad day on the exam, could you bounce back quickly? Of course not. You definitely couldn't. But if you look at things the way I do, using this life chart approach, what is happiness in life? It's when there are more red bars than blue ones, right? If you can turn your mood from blue to red within a week, congratulations. You'll have more and more opportunities to be in the red from now on. But if you let that mood linger for a whole year, with all that guilt, that sickening feeling, that sense of shame, and that general unease, well, I'm afraid your year will be marked by 1-2 people. So the fourth point is to cut your losses in time. If you're feeling down, try to leave those feelings behind at the end of the day. If that's really not possible, try to keep them confined to that week or even that month. Whatever you do, don't let those feelings carry over and affect your future entries. Your future entries can be in the red, because in the long run, life is about having more red entries than blue ones. I'm actually pretty good at this. I handle it just fine. Basically, no matter how big the issue is, I let it go after a week at most. That's usually enough. What will we cover in the second section? It's what we call estimating events. You see, in the first part, we treated life as a grid divided into days, weeks, or months to calculate what might happen in the future or how we might achieve happiness. In the second part, we can consider this. You can actually calculate the things you're about to do in life in a rather exaggerated way. In other words, by estimating the number of times you'll do something, you'll come to cherish each instance of doing it even more. Take me, for example. I love to travel, and I go on about 4 trips a year. Although I'd like to travel 6 times a year, the reality is that I probably only manage 4 trips a year. If I can maintain this pace of 4 major trips a year until I'm 60, that means I still have 120 opportunities to travel in my lifetime. However, there's one caveat to these 120 travel opportunities. Their quality will diminish over time. As you get older, the thrill of travel, including that sense of excitement and joy, and the people around you won't be as fulfilling as they were when you first started traveling. It won't be as enjoyable as it was when I was around 30. So, the number of truly high-quality trips is probably only around 60. As far as I'm concerned, what's the point of still being able to walk around at 50? That's how I see it. I'm 30 now, and I'm sorry, old dang, but that's how I feel. If I have diabetes at 50, what's the point of still being able to walk around? I'll have to take insulin, won't I? Never mind. I admit my lifestyle isn't healthy, but I figure I only have 64 opportunities for high-quality travel. Do you know what that means? It means I have to really want to go to every single place I visit, because I only have 64 chances. Every time I go somewhere, I have to really want to go there. The person accompanying me has to make sure I'm happy, and I have to make sure they're happy too. We have to look out for each other. It has to be someone I love, a close friend I've carefully chosen before I'll agree to go. So what happens in my life? If anyone ruins my mood while we're traveling, I'll hate them, and I'll never travel with them again, because this is just too important to me. When I travel, I tend to visit a lot of unique places like Africa or Egypt. In places like that, if you were to ruin the mood by saying, "Damn, man, what are you doing?" Well, I used to feel that way, but after thinking it through, I'm even more convinced that when it comes to travel, you absolutely can't settle for less. Yes, whether it's the flight I take, the places I visit, or the people I travel with, every detail is incredibly important, so I have to be very selective. I have to make sure I have a great experience this time, because opportunities are truly few and far between. Each one I take is one less, and I only have 60 left. I only have 60 high-quality trips left in my life, and traveling is pretty expensive too. That's right, it costs money. Let me give you another example. The time you actually spend with your parents is getting shorter and shorter. Many people enjoy spending time with their parents, but I don't. However, if you do enjoy spending time with your parents, there's something I need to tell you. After graduation, you'll basically see them twice a year, for about 5 days each time, which adds up to roughly 10 days a year. So, assuming your parents are between 60 and 90 years old, how much time do you think they have left? 30 years. And that's assuming they're in excellent health and we're working with the best case scenario, you still have 30 years left. If we break that down into 10 day periods, that's 300 days. Then, if we subtract the time they might spend sick, that leaves just over 200 days. Do you know what over 200 days means? It means you'll spend less time with him than you did in a single year when you were a child. So if you look at it this way, every time you do something you want to do in life, You have one less chance to do it, and those chances are already very few. Let me give you another example. Old friends. Old friends are truly precious. I'm the kind of person who really values old friends. How important are old friends to me? Well, if I were dating someone and we'd only been together for a few months and he started criticizing my old friends, I'd get upset. Or if he got into a conflict with my old friends, I might act one way on the surface, but deep down, I'd still feel that my old friends are what really matter. Why is that? When we think of old friends, the ones you've known since your school days, what kind of situation do we see? They were your friends when you had no social standing. They've seen you at your worst and at your best, but what they know is you as a person, not anything else. I don't know if any of you have ever thought about this. These days, you rarely get the chance to see your old friends, maybe once every 2 years or so. If you live to be 90 and he lives to be 90, you'll see him at most 30 more times, and each visit will probably last only 3 or 4 days at most. Isn't that precious? So please do fun things with your old friends. Make sure you're doing fun things together, and don't argue, because you only have about 30 more chances to see each other in this lifetime. Damn, isn't that scary? Do you still think life is long? It isn't. Most things in the world can be calculated, but some things you can't predict. For example, the odds of meeting someone you love, or of them loving you back, or the odds of making a new, good friend. These are all uncertain. Of course, there are very few uncertainties. Most things are certain, so your life story is that simple. All you have to do is make sure there's more red than blue. Next, we'll move on to the third section, titled Optimizing Life. Based on our previous discussion, we've come to understand one key point. Life is very short, and there are very few opportunities to do the things you want to do. What lessons can we draw from this? I believe there are 3 main points. First of all, every single day is important. Don't think that yesterday was more important than today just because something big happened, whether it was something wonderful or something terrible. If it was something wonderful, I hope you'll let that joy spread. When you feel like celebrating, go ahead and celebrate. Be truly happy. If a good event can make you happy for an extra week, then be happy for that extra week. If something bad happens, I hope you'll leave it in the past or give it a week at most, even if a family member passes away, or even if you get divorced. Don't let the blue part of your life gradually expand beyond a week or a month at the very most. In fact, if you break it down to each day, you should ask yourself, how can I make my day better? How can I make today a little happier? Finding ways to make yourself happy is very important. What is the second point? The second point is actually the conclusion the author reached, being in the same place as the people you love. In other words, if you have close friends, it's best to live in the same city as them. If you're in a relationship, try to avoid a long-distance relationship. And if you have parents, live with them if possible. Why is that? The data shows that if you live in the same city as someone, your chances of seeing them are much higher than if you lived in different cities. So if you can see the person you love more often, wouldn't there be even more of that red? Because they're the person you love, and they love you too, right? So wouldn't that mean there's just more and more of that red? What's the third thing? Prioritization is key. Events are ranked by priority. What should take priority? Things you really want to do, things that are almost guaranteed to make you happy, those are the priorities. For example, for many people, traveling is a great experience because when you're traveling, you don't have to think about work and you get to explore lots of new places, right? For example, when you go somewhere and want to explore the local cuisine, the exploration itself is a joy, unless the other person is being unreasonable and upsetting you, right? You should prioritize that kind of experience. So make sure you choose a great place and do your best to ensure everything goes smoothly. The weather should be nice too, right? You should also do your best to make sure the people you're traveling with won't cause major conflicts or step on any of your pet peeves. That's very important. If you're single and have the time and money, instead of getting drunk on the weekend, why not go on a trip with someone you love? To me, moments like these are as precious as gold. Think back to the last time you got drunk. Was there anything about it that truly made you happy? It was just okay, wasn't it? But think back to the last time you traveled with someone you love. I remember Du Wintao once said that the most wonderful thing in the world is traveling with the one you love. I agree with him. Of course, you can love many people that way. You can travel more and enjoy new experiences. You know, in my life, some people think I'm just too rational and cold-hearted. For example, some people accuse me of being manipulative, saying, "Why are you always screening people?" Relationships shouldn't be about this kind of screening. Actually, it's quite simple. I want to make sure I have more red days in my life. When I realize that someone's qualities or certain traits won't allow me to sustain that kind of vibrant, fulfilling life in the long run, I weed them out as soon as possible. What's that like exactly? It's like saying that if two people aren't compatible, they should break up right away, rather than waiting until after marriage to realize they're not a good fit. I still think it's all about cutting your losses early. Cutting your losses early. Is there something wrong with my approach? No, right? No, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's just that if it's not going to work out, we need to know ahead of time so we don't waste any of the slots in our lives. Every slot used is one less slot we have. Damn, doesn't that sound scary? I think we're often fooled by phrases that sound cool. What are some examples? Life is impermanent, for instance. It sounds cool and makes sense, right? Since it's a Buddhist term, it seems particularly profound, and you feel like saying it makes you sound really sophisticated. Let's look at it from a different angle. Life isn't just about impermanence. There are also many things that are certain, and what makes these certain things even more frightening is that both impermanence and permanence fill you with fear. Do you see what I mean? In other words, if you live to be 90, that's the maximum number of days you'll have, and if you see your best childhood friend only once every 2 years, you'll only get to see him 30 times at most. At best, 30 times. At worst, maybe just 10. That's a given. That's a certainty. There's no need to say more. That's just how it is. Are you going to cherish that time with him? So life isn't just impermanent, because sometimes, when people think about the impermanence of life, it seems as though there are countless possibilities for the future, but there aren't. There aren't countless possibilities. You can't stay together with your childhood friend forever, just like you did when you were young. That's no longer possible. It's not just impermanence. So when we think about impermanence, what we're really dealing with is uncertainty. We also need to remember that life follows certain patterns. There are many certainties, and you can generally predict a range of outcomes. It's that simple. After all, life is finite. I hope that after watching this video, you'll live your life with a clear plan, making it happier and more fulfilling. Face life's challenges head on. Never give up on yourself. All right, that's all for today.